Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be. My name is Palai Rageer, and welcome to Mezzo9's Mezzanine, where today it is my turn to play. Now, I have mentioned already that my name is Palai Rageer, but this is not the name I choose to go by. I'll be playing as a wizard character, as that is most suited to me. Not only the blue robes suit me well, he also fights with a staff and magic. This is me to a T, but the name Palai Rageer is not the one I choose to go by. I'd rather go by one of my titles. I have two of these, the Twirling Master and Palai of Sky, as in the Sky Temple where I live. I certainly would not call myself neutral, lawful good, far more like it. And let's set up my statistics as well. I'd say that intelligence and wisdom, intelligence more than wisdom are my strong points. Strength is also a strong point of mine, but it can't be any stronger than it is apparently. I wouldn't call myself that high of constitution, though. Nor that low of wisdom. I'd say that's a reasonably appropriate layout for me. Perhaps more like that. Yes, wonderful. So, today I intend to be telling you my story somewhat. Perhaps not the entire thing, as Mez has asked me to lay out a few details. He's also asked me to refer to him as Mez rather than his real name, which I find rather odd. But perhaps he doesn't wish for his identity to be known. I have met others like that at the Sky Temple. Although they haven't lasted long, they've generally not had quite the right level of... I wouldn't say loyalty is the word. Courage, perhaps? Faithfulness to themselves. Now, I'm already injured, so I must quickly rest. And I have promised you my story. Who I am, where do I come from, and how I ended up at the Sky Temple. So I was born Palai Rageer. Or perhaps I wasn't, depending on how you look at it. I was an illegitimate child of Margin Rageer. Raised as his own until I was 6 years old, but illegitimate nonetheless. See, my mother was one of the serving women, not the household's mother. So I was raised with 15 half-brothers and a half-sister. The serving lady that turned out to be my mother used to visit me regularly and take a special interest in me. Of course, I had no idea back in those days that she was my mother. I was a child, how could I know? But she was, and this was why. And the mother of the household, Lady Nix, seemed unhappy about it. It's obvious to me now why she was, but back in the day, it certainly was not. And it became even odder when this woman stopped coming into work. She stopped visiting me. After about 6 months of her not visiting, I started a conversation with my father about it. Asked him where she was, why she wasn't visiting me anymore, why my favourite serving maid had disappeared. But he couldn't really answer me at the time. He said to come with him, that he'd show me everything that night. And so, that night, in the middle of the night, Father came and woke me from my bed. And he took me down into the town, Travagum. Of course, we lived in the castle at the centre of Travagum. The Rageers are the royalty in Hyron. Not the only royalty, perhaps. Oh dear, did I just kill my cat? I certainly didn't intend to do that. Yes, I did. I feel terrible. But it is just a computer game. I'm sure I'll get over it. Besides, it's not like I have many other weapons available to me. Nonetheless, I shall miss my unnamed pet. Not that I have a pet in real life. I don't generally get along too well with animals. It's hard to tell what they're thinking. It's not like you can get an answer out of them. Let's just use up this gem quickly. Gem? Why did I say gem? I meant scroll, of course. Although we should use it on one of these gems. Perhaps they're worth something. Well, that one isn't, but who knows? Maybe the others are. Let's drop the worthless ones. Oh, both of them are. That's a shame. But we can simply move on anyway. I want to loop back and take out the area that I skipped, but I also want to drink from this fountain if I can. Perhaps get some stat ups, or just get a fight with an nymph. She's stolen my armour! I need that, otherwise I'm naked. One can't simply wander around naked. So I was part way through telling you the story of my childhood, and I had reached the point where, when I was about 6, the maid stopped turning up, and my father took me to visit her in the middle of the night. It was then that I learned that she was indeed my mother. It was then that he told me. He also told me that should Nyx ever find out that it had happened again, she would be in trouble. I didn't understand what he meant by had happened again. I was rather young back then and didn't really understand the meaning of her swollen belly. But it seemed to me that the maid had to stay away or be killed. Or at least that's what my father was telling me. And this was why she wasn't coming into work, because she couldn't for her life. Of course, the household's mother, Nyx, knew of my origins, but she didn't know that I knew. She had no clue that I knew. Part of the deal of her being able to survive the first time was that I never find out my true identity, my true birth. She didn't want me to be raised by some elven maid. She certainly didn't want me to discover that I am half elven. I'm sure she knows quite well that the elves are a far more intelligent race than humanity. And I'm sure she knew that I would do what I can, if I discovered my heritage, to actually help the elves. See, in a lot of cultures, especially my own, elves are considered nothing but slaves. And that is an unfortunate way of us being looked at. I know, I'm only a half-elf, but I still consider it us. They are my people as much as humans are. You know, I've still never read that book. Let's get it read. Learn Absorb Curse. Not that I'll be using it too much, because curses are a bad thing to absorb. It does rather hurt when you do so. But it's not like I had a huge amount of choice. Surprised I haven't leveled up with my staff just yet. I need to drop some of my armour, though. It's a little heavy. Perhaps I've got something else I can drop. Perhaps not. Well then. I say we lose the crystal armour, because I believe it reduces my spell chances. Or perhaps crystal is the one that doesn't. It's not metal, it's crystal. I suppose that makes sense. Zap the green mold and hope not to hit the shopkeeper. I believe I hit the shopkeeper. Can I? I don't have 100 gold. Too bad. Die pauper. Crap. This is an unpleasant situation I found myself in, it seems. He resists my wand's magic? I can't really be having that, because now he's going to kill me. Well, that hit better. I suppose we just zap him and hope I survive the fight. I think he hit himself there. I'm pretty sure he did. I have no idea how much health these shopkeepers have. I've never played this game, so never managed to kill one. None of these potions seem to be evidently healing, so there's not actually a lot I can do here but die. I presume, anyway. Yep. Dead. Ah well, I believe we have time for another round. Hopefully this one will go slightly better. I shan't bother setting up the character, I'm just going to dive straight into this one. I have a story to tell nonetheless. May have died, but that doesn't mean the story did. So, as I was saying, my mother had been forced to flee or die because Nyx Rageer, mother of the rest of the family, had said that had she become pregnant again by my father, she would be killed, and such a thing had happened. But my mother didn't know that I knew. Well, my stepmother didn't know that I knew my mother's real identity, or that she was not my mother. So when Nyx finally did find out, it was me that she came to. It was me that she asked to go and kill this lady in town. I was a 6-year-old boy. She didn't know that I knew it was my mother. Perhaps she did. Perhaps she was testing to find out if I knew. After all, one of the conditions had been known. The conditions of her life had been that I not know, rather. I'm fumbling so many words on this today. I'm going to wear this opal ring despite not knowing what it does. It may well be useful. It may well be worthless, and it may well be cursed. But I'm a risk taker, as the next part of the story should tell you. So Nyx had sent me to kill this lady in the middle of town. Not told me that she was my mother, but my father had already told me this himself. It seems she had found out what had happened. It had been about 4 months since I'd found out at this time, and I'd rather well come to terms with it. But I couldn't come to terms with her being my mother and then being asked to kill her. Such a thing is just too much to ask of a child. As if it wasn't bad enough that she was asking a child to kill for her in the first place. So, slyly, I agreed, and I went to my father and told him what had happened. My father told me I had 2 choices. I could either do what Nyx bid of me, seek out and kill this woman that was my own mother, or I could leave. I could run. I could go with her and get out of here. See, one part my father had left out was that if Nyx found out that I knew my mother's identity, she would have me killed as well. This wasn't good news, of course, but it forced my hand. See, I couldn't lie forever ever about not knowing, and I knew that already at such a young age. What I could do, though, was run forever. The Rageers hold little power outside of Travagum. There's little else in Hieron to hold power over, but there are other places, and many of them not on the side of the Rageers. I knew that I would have somewhere to flee to. Somewhere. Where could be decided later. But I couldn't just leave. I couldn't just leave without finding out what was going to happen to my mother. There was something else that my father said while I was there. While I was asking his advice on the situation. You see, one of those 2 choices, the fleeing, he liked the sound of more than he perhaps should have with his own son. Not that he would have ever forced it on me. But he knew I would need to, as well as I did. And he also knew that if I were to, he could do something he needed to with my help. You see, the Rageer family holds a legendary sword. It's one of Merlin's earlier legendary swords. One less wielded for power, for magical power, and one more for synergy with our own magics. Our own magics were particularly powerful on their own, but with this blade they could become immense, unstoppable forces of destruction. And Father knew that his children by Nyx were far from the best of people. He didn't want them having such a powerful weapon. It was bad enough that they were going to grow up to rule. His marriage to Nyx was one of politics more than anything else. He never liked the woman. I can understand completely why. She was an unpleasant woman. Everything she did for herself, for revenge, or for death. So Father couldn't have her or her children getting their hands on this powerful magical weapon. Instead, he told me to take it, to protect it with my life, for as long as I could, and as much as I could. So I did. I left that night, in the middle of the night, with the blade in hand. I followed the route that my father had shown me a few months past, and stabbed myself with a wand. My apologies for the short break in the recording there. Apparently, Mez's hard drive was a little bit full. I've had him come and clean that up for me, and I'm ready to continue on the next life. So, as I was saying, I followed Father's route that he had shown me a few days before down to the elven maid's house, my mother's house. You see, I wasn't planning to kill her, as Nyx had asked, but that didn't mean I could let her die. I had to warn her. Because if I didn't do it myself, Nyx was sure to send some of her other children, or even her guards, down to help. Down to do it themselves, to make sure. So I went to visit the woman. Alone this time. Father had never actually introduced me to her on the last visit. Hadn't actually told me in front of her. She didn't know that I knew. He had just shown me her. Shown me where she lives and watched her go in and out. Apparently they both knew that if they were seen talking to each other, it could mean death for either. Or me. But I knew where to go. I have a good memory for directions. I simply followed the way I had gone last time, and made my way there. It was the middle of the night when I arrived, but she still seemed happy to see me. A little worried to see me at the same time, but happy. She was awake already. Apparently the baby had kept her awake. Apparently they do that a lot. Unpleasant things, babies, but they are a requirement in the creation of new people. Anyway, the baby had been keeping her awake, so she was awake herself when I arrived. She sat me down and greeted me warmly. and made me a cup of hot milk. Goat's milk. Sheep can't survive in Hiron. And before long, I was sitting there as though it was my own home. Of course, the baby was crying at first, but it stopped soon. It just needed feeding. Perhaps that had been why she was awake. Oh dear, that's probably cursed. That's not good. It's cursed. Wonderful. Well, looks like I'm flying everywhere now. Rather fitting, as I really do fly to most places. It comes with being a master of the air. It's a powerful element. So she'd done everything she could to make me feel at home. And done everything she could to look after me, but she was still worried, and with good reason. She was more worried when I told her why I had been sent there. I made it perfectly clear that I didn't intend to do what Nix had asked, but also made sure to make clear what Nix wanted. See, if she didn't know that, she would still be at risk, even after I was gone. The guards would soon be there. In fact, sooner than I expected. I was barely done telling her when there was a knock on the door. She handed the child to me, just to hold him for a few minutes as she answered. I begged her not to, but she insisted it was safe, it was fine. After all, I was a 6-year-old boy. What did I know of intended murders by some queen to some woman that scorned her? Unfortunately, it was indeed my stepmother's guards that came through. She barely had time to open the door before the sword was thrust through her back. See, she spun round to calm me one last time as they came in. Perhaps this was foolish of her, but she did it nonetheless. And then she died, leaving me holding the baby and staring at these guards pouring in through the door, probably to kill me and the baby as well. Once again, I was left with no choice but to run. I sped out the back door as quickly as I could, and less than a few meters away there was a deep well, so I climbed down it. And it was dry at the bottom, with a system of tunnels. I'd later learned that these were the Hoshning tunnels. And that I was incredibly lucky to have survived even entering them. You see, they are one of the most dangerous places in Hiron. Every square inch of them is lined with traps, and secret doors, and places for the Hoshnings to sneak out of for a final attack on you. But my father had thankfully been friends with the Hoshnings back in his time. Meaning that I would be as safe as I needed to with them, as long as they knew who I really was. I must have been in the tunnels for weeks before they found me. The Hoshning of my day was named Hoshning the Precise, and he himself was the one that found me. Who else could? They were his tunnels. Apparently my father had warned him that I would probably be there. He had heard the story of me jumping down the well from his wife's guards. I suppose that if he had not told the story, I wouldn't have survived till this day. I would have died there in those tunnels. Lost forever. Hoshning was kind to me. He fed me. He gave me a place to bathe and rest for the night. And then he informed me that he only had the space and time in his life for one son, one apprentice. You see, the Hoshnings are not, strictly speaking, a bloodline. Each one adopts the next in its line, and raises them as their own even though they're not, and trains them all through their childhood, and in fact as long in their life as they can. Sorry, I'm just seeing if I can buy any useful scrolls, like some remove curse scrolls. Perhaps I have a remove curse scroll in there. Perhaps not. We'll never really know, because I'm sure I'm going to die again soon. It's hard enough finding food. Anyway, as I was saying, the Hoshning told me he only had the place for one apprentice, and that he would prefer to take one on younger. If taken from birth, as is the Hoshning tradition, they can learn from the very start that they are a Hoshning, and how to be a Hoshning. So he took my brother, my only brother, and raised him as his own, and sent me on to the Sky Temple. It wasn't a long journey. Hyron is a small world. And once I got there, people were kind. There was even a young lad by the name of Garrett Moole waiting for me. He knew I was coming, as any good Moole would. It was him who told me that my brother was important. It was Garrett that told me that I would be the one that needs to look after him. And so, following Garrett's instructions, I joined the Sky Temple. I became a paladin in training in those days, and I learned air melding from some of the greatest of their age, and eventually grew to be the greatest of my age. Arguably, of course, but I wouldn't argue with it. Nor would my enemies. Can't pick anything up while I'm floating like this. Perhaps that one. Well, that might identify me a removes curse scroll, and that would be nice. Enchant weapon. Come on. And that's out of charges as well. That's a worry. Well, I suppose I'm probably going to die here. Good thing I've nearly finished my story. Garrett told me that my brother would be important, and that I would need to look after him. And as I learnt air melding, I was also granted much time away, simply to protect my brother, to look after him. And he needed a lot of protection. But my brother was being raised as a Hoshning. He could not find out that he was not one, otherwise it wouldn't work. So I let my brother keep his Hoshning identity, and did my best to keep him unaware of my even existence. Sometimes I worry that he saw me. I even have a speech for the day that we meet planned out. It's a long one. It is mostly this story, to be honest. I've lived my life for my brother. To protect him, to aid his survival, and to never be found out that that is what I do. It has been a long 40 years. But my brother barely needs my protection anymore. I'm still there when my mool sends me there. But for the time being, I hope my brother can handle things alone. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode presented by Palai Rageer. Told the story of his childhood, I presume. It's what I told him to tell. I don't think he told it as well as it's written in my book, though. So, if you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to give me a like. Also, subscribe for more character runs on Wazhack. Don't expect me to play well at this game, I'm terrible at it. Although it's worth mentioning, I'm looking into a Twitch live streaming lately, and if I can get that set up, I might try and get some people to give me tips in real time on Twitch, because it seems to be good for that sort of thing. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Make sure to stop back next week for more of the same, and to stop back a few times in the meantime for maybe some Fallout, or for some Sour Pit Farms, or if I manage to get it edited and uploaded, some bloody Binding of Isaac, which I've really not been doing like I should. Maybe I'll move that completely over to Twitch, who knows? Not me right now. But anyway, I'll see you all again next time. Bye! Ugh, why won't the recording stop?